Good
I mean,
afternoon, Aristo.
Good afternoon, Ron. You got me. You dragged me into it, you know.
Well, you know, there was some hesitation on my part, but time is also running out. I have a window of opportunity here this morning that I didn't know I had yesterday. And as we were saying, there were some really sharp criticisms of my friend, whom I'm relating with very closely.
Is it 9/11 on your clock? Yeah, it's 9/11.
9/11.
Sorry, Rob. Okay.
Yes, it is 9/11. So good that you brought that out so that we know what time we started.
Emergency topic. Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, initially, the initial comments didn't get to her. I mean, she was still in a positive attitude, but after she saw some of the other comments, she needed my reassurance that I still loved her. And she was beginning to have, you know, wondering about what's going on because the energy felt really, really bad and she was not in her element. She likes to always be forgiving and loving and not be judgmental.
Did you reply to the comments? The first one I saw.
I made some replies, but I tend to let people like that make comments like that but they have to be hurt or have some experience that triggers them. And when they see somebody else choosing to live in a way that they don't choose to live, they don't understand that and they tend to lash out. And the energy of those comments was not very good. They bothered her more than they bothered me. Initially, they didn't bother her at all. But
I mean, maybe that's one of the things that bothered her was the fact that it didn't bother you.
Well, it did bother me.
Well, I mean, you didn't make a scene. You didn't demonstrate. So if she had a doubt, you know, that, well, maybe he's thinking about it. Maybe he's taking it seriously or something like that. So, because it's different when somebody would say, well, these comments hurt me, you know, and another asking for reassurance from you. I mean, what do you have to do with those comments? So, you know.
We talked about it at length, and we're going to be meeting here in a little while. She has a window of opportunity today in her schedule, and we're going to actually talk face to face. So she's a beautiful woman, and she really is trying to live her life with integrity and with values that are beyond what most people understand, quite honestly.
Well, everybody's been hurt in relationships in one way or another. And if you haven't been hurt, then you've been exposed to somebody else's pain at the very least. So people have scenarios in their heads. Whenever they experience something, for example, your situation, they automatically link to something they already know or have heard about and over again. So they cannot comprehend that it's something new, something different, and that you're coming. It's like me. If I try to express inner work in the way that I'm experiencing it, there are many factors that I cannot communicate for the simple fact that it's an experience that is beyond the norm, shall we say. And
most people don't have the point of reference to understand it.
Exactly. So you have an experience right now that transcends, and it's not just the experience you're having, but how it relates to your past and your aspirations for the future and all of it.
Indeed. And you know, it's an interesting thing that I've noticed. I mean, I've lived my life with certain values and certain presuppositions like everybody else, and I'm voluntarily going into a new way of looking at things, a new way of living and expressing love and many other things. And it's new for me, and it's a challenge for me. I mean, I'm pushing beyond my normal comfort zone and my boundaries that I've known for a long time. And I feel very justified in doing so. And yet it's a challenge for me too. I mean, this is all the way around something new. And I almost said her name. My friend, I don't want to put her name out in the public forum, but my friend is also going beyond areas that she's been familiar with. So we're each taking the other out of the normal range of operating, and the normal there's no past experience of either of us to go where we're going with this. It's a totally different dimension of relating to one another that we don't know what it looks like. We're creating it together.
Many people also have a view of relationship as singular. You're look, and again, a lot of it you could think people who've been watching your videos, you've always wanted to look for the one, and all of a sudden you did an about face, and that's difficult for people. You know, we're not just creatures of habit in what we do; we're creatures of habit in how we perceive things. So people perceive, you know, people are saying you're not acting like the Ron Van Dyke I knew. The same thing happens if you go through some kind of mystical training or process or whatever, esoteric development, you change. You don't really change, but your perspective changes. You become different in the eyes of other people, and that makes them very uncomfortable. You can lose, you know, the trust of family members. Friends won't see you the same. They think you're a different person because they don't even see you. They don't feel you. That's the most important thing. And when you're talking impersonally, well, through a video, no matter how personal you are, you're still an icon. You're still an idol of sorts, and you know,
Yeah.
a representation in people's eyes. And many people were attracted because you were you took the Christian values out of Christianity and put them into alternative spirituality and politics and all of that, and took out the fundamentalism and the dogma. Now you're even taking the old traditions out of Christianity. And, you know, that kind of conservative, well, I'm looking for the one and everything. People don't tolerate change in others because they don't tolerate change in themselves. And that's something we don't observe. We don't feel it because change is for the most part the enemy unless we approach it very, very carefully. So you are changing and going through the ups and downs and the turbulences, but you're affecting other people, especially since you're doing a sort of inner work that's affecting your environment. I think getting a rise out of people is a good indication. I mean, in my sense, I would say, wow, this indicates that I'm actually affecting my environment. It's not just, you know, people are tired of me or bored or whatever, but I'm actually not pushing buttons, but I'm actually touching other people with the good, the sensitivity and all that. That might not even be touching them at the deep enough level because, you know, a lot of people are into the drama. They may use spiritual terms and all of that, but they view your emotions as a sort of dramatization that's a part of them. But the people that criticize you are actually more involved in what you're doing than most other people. And they represent a lot of other people that don't make comments because they're polite or whatever, they're thoughtful, they're loving, you know. But for some people, I notice it touched the chord. And,
yeah, it's interesting. I got another call from the ambassador.
Oh, wow.
That's the fourth time in 5 days, but I sent them a message on Tuesday, don't call me, I'm not going to be available this evening. And I wasn't. But anyway, be that as it may, he said, you've got the red dragon's attention, and you're drawing a lot of energy, and it's a very major spiritual dimension. There's all sorts of people looking at you and what you're trying to create and what you're trying to do. And he said there's people that are in love with you. There's people that want to stop whatever it is that you're doing because it frightens them. I mean, his take on the whole thing was quite interesting, to say the least. And he believes that she and I are on a divine mission. I mean, as he sees it, what we're attempting to do, and we don't even have definitions for that yet. But
well, however you view this person, I mean, I don't even know who this person is or if he is who he says he is or whatever.
Neither do I.
But he speaks archetypally, and that's significant. That makes it worth paying attention to. And so he's talking about the red dragon as opposed to the white dragon. And this has an esoteric significance. The red dragon's attention represents the comments that were made on YouTube. You know, the passionate comments, and it needs to be that way because if you only draw the attention of the so-called white life force, it's almost like all the loving people will say good things about you, but you're not grounding the issue. When you're doing Ho'oponopono, you're going to rock the boat in many ways, and you're going to have an adverse reaction. I mean, you come up to somebody, who's hurt, and you say, forgive me, excuse me, I love you, and all of that, you know, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to be nice to you and happy that you're doing it. You know, there can be a lot of, you're going to, you know, and it's also the opinion that you're not asking forgiveness because you did something wrong. You're asking forgiveness for the general wrong. The forgiveness is universal. It's almost like God asking forgiveness for itself. It's because blame cannot enter the picture here. People will put themselves, and people get very angry when you force them to face things. And sometimes forcing them to face things isn't really forcing, but by vibrating a dynamic of acceptance and feeling, they're also resonated with a dynamic of acceptance and feeling, and they don't feel, their ego hasn't made the choice to do so. It's very
it's not comfortable for them.
Well, you're taking the role of the shadow without being the shadow, and that's the only way you can actually redeem the shadow. You have to take its place. I mean, you're in the shadow comes up to us, slaps us in the face, does all kinds of things, and threatens to hurt us and hurts us until we pay attention. But once you take on that role, once you address the shadow in its own terms and begin accepting it, you're rocking the boat now. You're in the role of grabbing people's attention and making them look at things, but you're doing it in a loving way. That doesn't matter. They don't care because, you know, that they just don't want to look at it. So the thing that needs to be released from this plane, everything else can stay, is denial. The tendency toward denial. It's not a material thing, and it's not even an entity. It's an attitude. This attitude essentially is a defensive one. It doesn't matter. Its time has come and it needs to go. Denial isn't just, I refuse to look at that. Denial is an energy one can feel that says, I hate life, I want it all to end. And when denial is projected, it hurts things. It hurts people. It hurts event. It hurts existence itself. So all of these are experiences where you're now taking the place of the shadow, and what you're going to find, what I have found, what I have, you know, experienced in others finding, is that the presence of the shadow is going to seem more intense because the contrast between you and the shadow is increasing. It's not just this going to dissipate, it's actually on the outside. I mean, the paradox is you're going to find greater fulfillment in yourself as you're going to notice the shadow increasing on the outside. It's almost like you're sending up a flare that, here, I'm working on this, I'm doing this, and everything that needs healing is going to be attracted to you. And that's not going to be comfortable. So as you perceive the world through that layer of what needs healing, you're going to perceive the pains of the world a lot more. It's not going to be, you know. Yes, exactly. The thing is, that's why we are always altering our course. It's not just stay the single course and do it straight ahead, because we're noticing that our process is getting upgraded. It's becoming more advanced and it's becoming more complicated or seemingly difficult, but it just means, look, man, you're not healing for no reason. You're healing to become more empowered as well, which means you have more resources, which means you have more of a capacity now to stimulate your creativity. Your power of prayer is more increased. But if you don't practice these options, if you don't expand the boundaries of what you can do or think you can do and address the situations, then, you know, these things aren't going to fire up. It's like, yes, now you've healed it, but it's time, you know, the limb is, just because you heal a broken arm doesn't mean you shouldn't exercise it after it's healed. It needs to be worked. And so we're working all of these lost muscles, and that can also be painful because the muscles still remember what happened to them.
Yeah, my friend that I'm taking to the hospital today, she had carpal tunnel syndrome operation around the 1st of April. And then within 2 weeks, she fell and broke her hip and her ankle, both. And I'm taking her to the doctor later today, this afternoon. But she got the cast off of her, and she's having to learn how to move her fingers and everything. They're all stiff and sore, and it hurts.
Is it the one hand or both of them?
Well, her left, I think she broke her right leg, and I think it's her left hand that she had the operation on. But she broke the left hip and the right hip and the right ankle. I believe that's true. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the way it is.
like I said, pattern recognition, and this is one resource. And it's no coincidence which part of the body sends its pain messages. Every part of the body has its own significance. So, you know, the left arm is a receiving arm. It's an arm of acceptance. And if acceptance is painful, then the body's saying, look, man, you're doing harm to yourself. The right leg is a grounding, but the grounding along the sides, with grounding being too intellectual, being too analytical, being based on principles that are not really founded on organic truth. Ideals, for example, when you're trying to living up to an ideal and make that ideal realistic, you may be saying with yourself, in yourself, I can't accept this dirty, messy stuff. I can accept the pain and the healing, but I can't accept the rage I feel inside of myself, or the repressed resentment, or you know, why is everything repressing anything? There's no way we can identify. I mean, she did say, you know, we need to put ourselves in the position of the perpetrators. But how can you do that if you reject all of that stuff in yourself? All of the stuff that would make you otherwise hate yourself or blame yourself, or not, or notice that, hey, you're not living up to that ideal. That was one of the messages I saw from all those critics. They saw an ideal that they didn't see realistic. It's like, you're fooling yourself. You can't live up to this ideal. Well, if the energy of the person was actually coherent with what their mind is projecting, then there wouldn't be that reflection. But at the same time, because if the form of the reflection was there, she would be understanding of it and it would be minimized. Let's put it this way. It's not just an either or, it would be or it wouldn't be, but it would come in a different way that wouldn't be hurtful to her. But now it's basically, look, you know, they are sending a message. They don't get the feeling from you that you're being completely honest with what you're presenting. That doesn't mean you're lying to yourself, but it means that something in the presentation is discordant. And in my sense, that one of the things, you know, that can be identified as such is putting yourself in the place of the perpetrator, in the place of all these people that you're tempted to say, well, it may be judgment or it may not be against these perpetrators, but one thing that we do sense is resentment, and we do sense the need to stop our own pain. We are enraged because we're being perpetrated against. And this rage is a natural feeling. Hatred is the reversal of love. You cannot force love upon hatred. You have to reverse the hatred itself. You have, and that means enantiodromia. Enantiodromia means it's almost like becoming the river itself and then making the choice to reverse the current.
Yeah, making it flow north instead of south or whatever.
Exactly, making it go up instead of down, and then realizing, well, it's been going up all the time. I'm just turning it to its rightful course. But the whole thing that causes the river to go in the opposite direction is denial, because natural things are equipped, if not with the actualizations and the manifestations, they're equipped with the potential. And when you address your inner being to access your potential, it's a very, very difficult place to be, because you have to go through layers upon layers of denials that are the denial of life itself, the denial of freedom, the denial of all of these things. But it begins with the denial that I can do it, because we're always trying to make it easy for ourselves. This is why, you know, I may seem a little pushy sometimes in saying, look, you know, it's a really tough, you know, saying it's not easy doesn't do it justice. I mean, you're going to experience more of this. It's not going to be a factor of, oh, when is it going to end? It's going to be a factor of you becoming more empowered until the same thing becomes child's play. And when it becomes child's play, then you'll be able to make actual choices. You'll be able to read the structure of events, the flow of events, to know exactly who everybody is, what they're saying, and how they're influencing you. And your sense of morality will be it will be natural. It will not be dependent on givens of fear that you're going to do something wrong. And then we can enter a stage where, well, we can vibrate an energy where where we don't have to control things, where it doesn't have to be my freedom ends where another person's freedom begins. Because when you're abusing freedom, you're actually in denial yourself in some way. Denial is operant in that situation. If denial turns into acceptance and ceases to be operant, then the issue of stepping on toes won't exist, because everybody is going to be free to mind their own business, and there will be ample resources to do so. The problem with the psychopaths isn't that there aren't any resources. I mean, they're artificially making it so that there aren't any resources. They just don't want to be reminded that other people can have a good time and enjoy life, because they're not. They don't want to be exiled into hell where everybody else, because they're hell. I mean, who can put themselves in the place of a rape victim if they haven't been raped as a child? I mean, who's going to go out there and, well, get yourself arrested, if you're young and pretty or good looking or whatever gender, go to jail, get your ass raped a couple of times, and then, when you come out, let's see, then you'll know how they feel. That's one way to do it. But that damages the body and damages, that's entering into trauma. However, we have all experienced these things in one way or another. It's part of our karma. It's there. We can enter them from a position of having had the experience and having the willingness to heal. But look, this has never been done before. When we say this, it's easy. Oh, yes, it hasn't been done. We can do it. Everybody still acts like it's the easiest thing in the world, or that it's no big deal, or that it's a little bit of a deal. Or, when they hit that wall of insanity and depression, things that make people tear their eyes out and jump off of cliffs, they even the thought of such a thing frightens them. People don't understand what the meaning of the word demon is. It's basically that kind of formation, something that comes at you that's really one with you, but, the shadow. And again, the shadow, we belittle it.
The ambassador stressed that there's a lot of demon activity taking place here. They are very activated, which again is the shadow being brought into the awareness, if nothing else.
Exactly. And there are demons of light and there are demons of darkness, This is all interesting to me because I've been addressing it from a more transpersonal perspective, deeper archetypal perspective, in the sense of the darkened side of God, you might say. And this is very difficult to bridge between what people already know, the personal stuff, relationship, psychology, and this more transpersonal thing. But for me, it helps because, the transpersonal is over here, the personal is over here, but the collective that we're trying to address, that we want to address to make changes in the world with an outward expression through an inner focus, eventually leading to an outward expression. But, we're passing through that. I mean, it's the other transpersonal side that's pulling us through the collective side. But very, very few people can understand what the transpersonal side really is. The archetypes become literal for them. And the only way around that is to feel them. What is the red dragon? What is the white dragon? An easy way to see that, an easier way to experience that is, well, look at women. Esoterically speaking and physiologically speaking, women have two forms of a cycle: the red form, the blood flow, and the menstrual flow, and the white form, which is the fertile period. It's the period, and women's mood change during that variation. So you have the point where the woman is very nice and very receptive if she's fertile for the most part, hormonally speaking, and this is when the woman is more docile, and men would always, why can't women always be like this? And then you have the wild woman, the woman that expresses passion, is even more erotic, intimidating toward the man, to the point that many shamans couldn't handle it and said, well, if you're menstruating, you've got to go out in the boonies where we don't have to feel anything. So the red dragon isn't only a kind of, whatever, neutral or male. It's very much connected with the goddess, and you might say the white Kunda flow and the red Kunda flow. But it's also connected, and many, many people are sticking to the white, which essentially, if you're talking about Oriental traditions, white is the color of death. They use it for mourning. But in any case, in the Western traditions, because I see this person actually mixing Eastern tradition with Western tradition.
Very knowledgeable in esoteric matters.
Yes.
And speaks in symbols from Christianity, Judaism, and Islam mostly, but throws in some Hindu and Buddhist stuff every now and again as well.
Exactly. But it's difficult for the layperson, shall we say, to make sense, because sometimes the symbols mean different things in different cultures. But what I'm trying to say is that when you move, and the Tibetans used to, they would distinguish between the white flow and the black flow. And they go, oh, you never touch the black flow. You stay away from that. The black flow is the shadow. But the thing is, the shadow isn't originally, I mean, the shadow is the womb of the goddess. I mean, that's the primary shadow. It's the big dark void out of which everything is born. And the dark void is infinite potential. Now, the goddess has two moods, you know, the childhood aspect is different. So we can say three moods. And the crone aspect originally is not a crone. It's not an old woman. It's meant to be the menstrual flow. So you have the fertile aspect of the goddess, which is the mother, and then you have the crone, which is really Lilith. It's not some old woman. The wise woman is really the horny, wanton, you know, what men really, really got scared of. And because they repressed it, it got old and shriveled. So, you know, when menstruation stops, what's left? But you're really, really talking about something living, and you're really talking about the dark goddess, which is the red flow and all of these things. But when you go into that, you experience everything that's, not only everything that's been denied, but everything that can be born. But some of these things are not meant to be born. I mean, we don't want them to be born. The goddess doesn't want them to be born because they're actually the womb itself. You can't start tearing out the womb in order to create things. What needs to be created is part of the goddess and stuff, but it actually precipitates and is drawn out and is moved out, and it's all according to love. Love defines what comes out, and love defines what remains. Some things, and we're talking about potentials, we're not talking about created things, but the fact is, a lot of things have been created that have not meant to be created. And we're not talking about being so much as events. Events are things too. We already mentioned it. It's all a verb. Everything is an action, really. So if we look at it in those terms, we don't have to, we can say, well, this person doesn't have to die. They just need to be exorcised. And what we exorcise, we do not deny. We just return it to where it belongs. We redistribute all of creation to where everything needs to be and where it all wants to be. And we do this with feeling. We don't do this with some kind of symbolic, esoteric, philosophical organization and analysis. That helps to understand things, but the process, we become an orchestrator, a musical genius of playing our feelings and being responsive to the feelings like a musical instrument is responsive to the player, and all of these things. It's all an erotic, a sensual exchange. But very, very few people, especially the ones in charge, and not just, like I said, the ones apparently in charge, but the ones who are behind them, they're ancient, you know, whatever. Corporeal, non-corporeal. They're afraid of the real red dragon. So anybody out there who is personifying that thing, especially from a male aspect, is actually the denial of the true red dragon, which is the goddess red flow. That's why you have, like the Muslims or the communists with red flags, revolutionaries, the militant, violent, martial red, you know, that comes out, is a repression of the natural, passionate, you know, having sex without having kids. Let's put it that way. I mean, it used to be in many religions that having sex without having kids was a sin. And, you know, enjoying your, you know, so enjoying yourself, I mean, if you're of a certain age to embody a certain archetype that is, well, the old elderly priest or whatever, it's like, no, this archetype was meant to be for those who either did not have kids or did not want kids or did not, you know, or were past the age of having kids and then they retired or whatever, but they're still youthful and passionate. And the monk was not meant to be in isolation. The monk was the guy who said, okay, I've done my duty to my household and whatever in society, and I'm going to go get laid for the rest of my life. You know, I'm going to go have fun. I'm going to go, it's almost like, imagine that as soon as you reach retirement, you become 20 again. And poof,
I wish that. Or
That,
I'd be glad for 35 to 40.
well, let's say that that is one of the possibilities of what you're doing. The energies that are being challenged, you know, in the relationship you're in. I mean, people don't see it. This isn't a relationship in the socio-psychological sense. It's something far deeper. It's not a relationship based on the commitment of two people together living in a little house, cooking for each other and doing all these things. Based on the, oh, I just don't want to die alone type of thing. Or I found the one and now we can be one and, oh, we'll hold each other against the world, you know. None of these are transformation based. This is something that is entering what your friend called, the ambassador called, the red dragon, the red serpent, you know, the red river or current, the menstrual flow. And it is very intense because right now this red current is occupied by war, by violence, by violation, by hatred, by rage, all of these things that your female friend has a very tough time addressing. And she only got a little, and you know, life is going to lead her and you, and this is where you come in that sense, because you're more experienced in addressing it. You know, you're more experienced in confronting things like that. The cop is the one that, you know, you got beat up by a cop, for example. You not only got you know, humiliated by a police officer, you processed it. You know, that's something very few people do. You process the event for a long time and circulated it and have come to terms with the situation in a certain way. Even if you haven't come to terms with it in some finalized sense, you're in a position to keep addressing that kind of vibration, and you're constantly addressing it. You notice that when people say, oh, let's just forgive the bad guys and get on with our lives, you know that this isn't going to happen. It's unrealistic. You can't just, because it's a lie. You're not forgiving anybody. When you're still holding the crap inside of you, you're not forgiving anybody. Unless, and if nobody's going to sit around and identify with a psychopath and keep a straight face, you know, identify with being raped and violated and psychically abused for years on end, you know, and not reaching the brink of a certain crisis. It's just that's why, you know, the suggestion is you take things a step at a time and keep dealing with what's on your plate, because if you jump too far ahead into what the challenge is, it's going to break you. It's broken many, many people. And this has never been done before. It's new territory. And each of us is expanding in a different direction in this new territory. And we're complementing each other in a way as well. But there are traditions, esoteric traditions, that deal with the darkening of God. Because God, yes, you want to say something?
I'm looking at the time, and I'd, you know, like to wrap up within at least 3 or 4 or 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, sure, no problem. It's 4:44 where I am, so
yeah,
that's a good idea.
444, huh?
Yeah, and I'll get to the whole situation with transpersonal and God thing, but the side of God that people see is the light, and the dark side of spirit of consciousness. There is a dark side of consciousness, but the reason that they don't see it conscious is because its place is within the red or the black. It's within the womb of potential, where nothing is manifest but everything can be. Is an energy sense that we can experience while manifest, and you don't have to be a mystic or a sage to do this. But I'd like to move into addressing that, hopefully, if nothing else comes in the way next time. So, you know, as far as, because right now we've talked about the psychological aspect, the relationship aspect, and a little bit of esotericism. So we'll see where it goes. Okay, still 444.
Wow, that was quick.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to.
Oh, I can.
I know you.
I can close it, open it.
So, I can too. There's no loss of words or conversation. With my friend and I mean, we never run out of things to discuss with each other. Never. It's never boring either.
Never boring. You can cut a topic off any given moment without seeming that it's cut off, you know. So there's a constant flow of inspiration coming in, and that says something in and of itself.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and hang there for a minute after we stop the recording. I'm going to say namaste and in Lakesh.
Namaste as well.
All right.
Lakesh.